a Latina of mixed Mexican and Puerto Rican descent who grew up in Los Angeles, California, I knew I was in for a bit of a culture shock when I came to live and work in Columbus, Ohio in 2013. Until that time, I'd lived mostly in Latinx majority neighborhoods. So my understanding of Mexican food came from family cooking and Mexican-owned and operated restaurants. Now, when Mexican food is what you're used to, then picante, or the heat that comes from chilies, it's a stimulant on par with coffee, and nothing makes you feel alive in the same way. There I was in a state whose Latinx population was about 3.3% in the year I arrived. We were a small minority, and yet there were Mexican restaurants everywhere. On my urgent quest for flavor, I found myself stepping into a number of non-heritage Mexican restaurants, or Mexican restaurants that are created by and intended for people who do not come from a Mexican background. Very quickly, I found myself troubled by some of the messages I observed about my community. And I went from being hungry to being angry. These places were using mocking and defamatory ideas about Mexican people to sell Mexican food. For context, let's get an overview of Mexican food in the United States. A reported 85% of US counties have at least one restaurant that serves Mexican food. And an estimated 99% of the population lives near at least one Mexican restaurant. But what are these restaurants? With over 8,000 locations, close to 10% of the nation's Mexican restaurants are Taco Bell. Taco Bell. Joining Taco Bell on the list of top 50 fast food chains in terms of system-wide sales, we have Qdoba, Del Taco, Chipotle, El Pollo Loco, and Taco John's is not too far behind. Along with these corporate fast food chains, family-owned Mexican heritage taco shops and restaurants dot the nation's boulevards, strip malls, highways, and byways. And Mexican cuisine is increasingly found in fine dining environments. By all measures, Mexican food is an enormous industry. Yet, this takes place alongside the national rejection of Mexican people. Because when you place demand for Mexican food next to the national frenzy of anti-immigrant policies and sentiments, you get a clear picture of the continuum of desire and disdain that characterizes the Mexican food marketplace. Noticing patterns of defamation, I set out to conduct cultural studies research. And for my field work, I aided over 24 non-heritage Mexican restaurants in places where the Mexican population was low, but demand for Mexican food was high, including the cities of Terre Haute, Indiana, and Lima and Columbus in Ohio. The repeated pattern of defamation began to remind me of the 19th century form of entertainment called blackface minstrelsy. With blackface minstrelsy, mostly white, mostly male performers darkened their faces with burnt cork and painted a large swath of exaggerated color around their mouths to create insulting renditions of African American musical practices. Much like with blackface minstrelsy, many non-heritage Mexican restaurants circulated buffoonish imitations of non-white culture. This led me to coin the phrase, culinary brownface. Culinary brownface describes non-heritage Mexican restaurants that curate an atmosphere of white superiority. Culinary brownface takes place when stereotypes about dirtiness, ignorance, laziness, sexuality and debauchery are used to sell Mexican food. Now let's clarify that merely experimenting with Mexican food is not an aspect of Culinary Brownface. So if you want to eat a tater tot burrito or pour melted processed cheese food on your bag of Doritos, that's going to be between you and your family doctor. It might be a concern, but it is not the issue that I'm raising. I'm not talking about flavor profiles. In the Midwest, Culinary Brownface has been around for well over 50 years. When the Taco Bell chain arrived, it brought with it, in the 1960s, it brought with it the mascot of a grinning, barefoot peon child. And in the 1970s, the fast casual chain Chi-Chi's had locations throughout the region. Diners who came in were, on a birthday, were given a large mariachi sombrero and surrounded by a crowd of servers who clapped out a happy birthday serenade that concluded with a thunderous Olay. You know, like we do in the old country. Presumably, most diners were unaware that the word Chi-Chi's translates from Mexican Spanish as tits. Yeah. Culinary Brownface, it takes many forms, but the major ones that I'm going to talk about are the Mexican Bandido or Mexican bandit stereotype. Bandido imagery tells diners that they've crossed the border into an outlaw's paradise where anything goes. A connection between Mexican culture and reckless, immoral overindulgence has some roots in the Prohibition era between 1920 and 1933, when it was illegal to produce and distribute alcohol. Travelers could set foot in Mexico and suddenly have access to all the drinking that was prohibited in the States. In the US imagination, vices came to be seen as what Mexico was for. In food sales and advertising, Frito Bandido became the mascot for Frito-Lay brand in 1967. Grimy and thieving, Frito Bandido stole precious Frito snacks from white consumers in the commercials. The National Mexican-American Anti-Defamation Committee sought the removal of the Frito Bandido mascot, which they achieved after a 3-year-long battle in 1971. Although Frito-Lay got rid of its Frito Bandido, echoes of Bandido imagery are alive and well in a Culinary Brownface restaurant near you. I saw these images, signs suspended from the ceiling in one of the restaurants I visited. The first says, Sucio Bigote, which translates to mustache dirty, because of course the syntax is wrong. And the other is bailar en el bigote, dance in the mustache. It might seem strange to use dirty facial hair to promote the sale of food items. But what's going on here is that diners are encouraged to abandon restraint, which is implied to be a white thing, and to engage in down and dirty overconsumption, which is staged here as a brown thing. Another major aspect of Culinary Brownface is mock Spanish. Much like derogatory ching chong talk, that's a slur against East Asian communities. This grammatically incorrect pretend Spanish is intended to be humorous, but it's actually a put down of the language and its speakers. We hear it all the time in expressions like no problemo and no bueno. And one of the restaurants I visited held Cinco de Drinko happy hour specials on the 5th of every month. Now let's emphasize right now that although I began my research in the Midwest, Culinary Brownface is by no means exclusive to the region. It's not even exclusive to the United States. Take, for instance, the Cabo Wabo Cantina franchise that's met with success on both sides of the US-Mexico border. Cabo Wabo takes its name from Cabo San Lucas, the resort town in Mexico, and Wabo, which is mock Spanish for wobble. The restaurant's founder was inspired when he witnessed a drunken man stagger or wobble down the streets of Cabo San Lucas. So you see, the US dollar will seek and reward the culinary brownface business model, even in Mexico. Given some 99% of the US population lives near at least one Mexican restaurant, the messages these businesses convey matter. As a society, we've come to understand that blackface performance and ching-chong talk are harmful. So it's stunning that culinary brownface continues to get a pass. In one of the brownface restaurants I visited, I spoke with a Spanish-speaking Mexican heritage server who admitted to me that he could not eat the food at the restaurant where he worked. Instead, he recommended a heritage location that I visited the following day. When I walked in, the dining room was covered with richly colored murals depicting indigenous Mexican history and pride. That server reminded me that the expression, "you are what you eat," is about more than just the ingredients on your plate. Fortunately, it is not hard for most of us to pick up our devices and locate a number of heritage Mexican restaurants with menu items that don't sound like the punchline to a racist joke. And no one is happier than me to report that the Mexican heritage food scene has grown by leaps and bounds over the last 12 years in the city I call home. So I ask, what would you rather eat? Defamation or dignity? Thank you.